So I think this title is fair. It is the biggest climate bill of our lives because we've had no significant climate bill at all before. So I guess that is significant in a certain sense. That is significant in a certain sense. So let's hop right in here. Let's get the liberal hopium going. Let's get the DSA libbing. Let's got the libbing going. Let's get the libbers in the chat. Let's go. You want to see an oversight report on the Trump-Saudi nuclear link? Sure. Oh, Mike, we won in Milwaukee last week. Yes, I know. I talked about it. I need to make a tweet about this. DSA lib, let's go. Let's get them rolling.
Good morning, John. Today, Joe Biden is probably going to sign the largest single piece of climate change legislation any country on our planet has ever enacted, but everything
Dude, like, if I were fucking Kamala Harris, I would be going on television. I'm 45 years old, 50-something years old. You're the vice president. You just cast the tie-breaking vote. I'd be on every Sunday show. Why is she so bad at this? Peppo Dam, thank you for the prime. Why is she so bad? She's like she's the most important vice president since Dick Cheney, who was like the most important vice president ever. Now, important doesn't mean good. And she's just nowhere. And for people that like she has a bad PR team, I think she has a bad PR team. I'll give you that. She certainly doesn't have a good PR team, but she may be one of the worst politicians I've ever seen. Just everybody, the Democratic Party is waiting for her not to suck. And she just sucks. She just sucks.
I have read, and I have read a lot, is frustratingly thin on detail. And as I tried to do the research myself on that, I discovered why. I've been going over nonpartisan analyses, Congressional Budget Office reports, talking to the people who wrote those reports, talking to the administrator of the EP.
This is like liberal fucking aphrodisiac. He went to a nonpartisan report. You can feel him like the cum is dripping off his fingers. Just the idea of a nonpartisan report.
Even in some cases, reading the actual text of the 700-page bill, and what I have found has been a surprise, but also a bit of a delight. So let's start at the beginning. This is the beginning. A delight. Around 4 billion years ago, something started to be alive on Earth, and ever since then, that life has had a profound effect on the planet. Photosynthesizers used sunlight to break up carbon dioxide, build their bodies out of the carbon, and release the oxygen. That oxygen made all kinds of interesting, weird things happen, including at one point killing almost everything. So no, life creating atmospheric change that has a profound negative impact on life, not actually new. Over time, life kept shoving energy into carbon.
Yeah, isn't that really interesting, chat? When you look at a tree, this is a question for the chat. When you look at a tree, branch, where does the tree get
Keep doing what you do,
the material to make the wood? Where does the tree get the material to make the wood, chat? Water Tower says roots. Himbo Slice says soil. Old School Hype says the ground. And the answer is wrong. You're all wrong. The vast majority is obviously water, so I guess technically the water from the roots is a good is fair, but it's the carbon dioxide. They literally suck their bodies out of the air. And they use the sun. It's incredible. Trees are fucking insane. Like, plants are the actual miracle of life. Animals are kind of like just existing from all that plant material. Fundamentally, we are just all dependent upon that incredible photosynthesis reaction. That's the reaction that really makes life significant. You also breathe out CO2, which is most of the weight you lose after eating. After water, you pee. That's actually true. When you lose weight, you breathe it out. That's actually totally true. You don't poop out weight. Poop is just the stuff that you can't digest and waste products of metabolism, but they're like a very small percentage. When you lose weight, it isn't pooping. And you know how I can tell you this? I'll give you an example. So I did this program called Siri when I was in the military. And one of the things is, it's Siri, survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. So survival part of that is you don't eat for days, or you eat like one tiny meal of like 400 calories, right? When you don't eat, guess what you don't do? You don't shit at all. So I think I went 9 days without taking a crap because there was no food intake. But I lost a lot of weight. Mike, I weighed myself before and after a shit. I went down 3 pounds.
Sweet
Explain that,
16.
Mr. Science
Do
Man.
I get a dance and a corsage?
Skittlebutt, thank you for the 16. And no, you don't, because that's very sus. Video is pushing communist evolutionary theory. The Earth was made 6,000 years ago exactly. This is liberal BS. Yes, God made everything. All right, let's keep going.
Containing molecules, and then after the life died, those molecules would break down and the energy would be re-released. But sometimes the molecules of the dead thing would stay trapped and they wouldn't break down,
But
and
I
they
lost a
would
lot
get
of weight,
stuck
Chad.
in the earth, where they'd heat up and get squished and become coal or oil or natural gas. All of that energy, emitted by the sun, grabbed by life, and then stored by the earth, waiting there to power your car or your refrigerator or your Microsoft
thanks, that's
Zoom.
your
That
one.
energy is what has powered so much of our modern lives. But as we have released that energy to do things with, we have also released the original molecules that it was stored inside of. Those complicated carbon molecules get broken down, and
Not
carbon
a weight loss
dioxide
program. It wasn't a weight loss program.
gets released. It is a molecule that is opaque to a
Incredible.
lot of
I love
infrared
chatters,
radiation,
honestly.
a gas that makes our atmosphere less clear to heat. And so heat that would otherwise escape no longer is. There is more energy in the atmosphere, and it's changing weather patterns, increasing droughts and fires and storms and heat waves. But unfortunately, we also really need all of that energy to prevent people from dying in heat waves, to make the food that people eat, to move it around, and to power the plane that takes me to visit my brother. We can't just turn the power plants off. People would start dying very quickly, and they wouldn't stop for a really, really long time. It's messy and it's complex, and like those first cyanobacteria, people started to wonder if we weren't gonna just ruin it for ourselves. But we are smarter than them, and we are more capable of passing broad-based industrial policy with a focus on clean energy than they are. Barely. Just barely. And that brings us up to now.
I'm so excited, and I just can't hide it.
In 2005, a couple of years before this YouTube channel began, the US hit peak carbon emissions of 7 billion tons per year. At the time, that problem looked pretty insurmountable. This is Jesse Jenkins, one of the world's leading experts on modeling decarbonization efforts, talking about those dark years.
At the time, if you could get a wind farm that costs less than $100 a megawatt hour, which is like triple the normal electricity rate, that was a great deal.
Yeah.
And solar was 10 times the cost of normal power from a gas plant or something. But over the last decade, due to supportive policies in the US, but also abroad in China and Germany and Japan and elsewhere, we've taken these
Yeah, Germany, Japan, China, and elsewhere. What they mean by that is China did it. It was all China. It was all China.
what we used to call expensive alternative energy technologies that at the time people were worried we couldn't get 5 or 10 or 15% of our electricity from without blowing up the grid.
He said
And
China,
now
like-
they're cheap.
Yes, but he equated China with Japan and Germany, which is not to say that Germany or the Netherlands or these other places haven't done things. They have. But it's all China. Like all the solar panels, almost all the improvements in the manufacturing, and specifically the economic reduction in cost, that's China.
Cheap trillion-dollar mainstream, technologies that are scaling rapidly and are powering, in the case of some parts of the country, the majority of our electricity on certain days.
I am in what seems to be a weird situation of being more optimistic now than I was 20 years ago, because in that time I have seen a lot of change. Since this YouTube channel began, we have dropped from 7 billion tons to 5 billion tons emitted per year in the US. In the next
Most of that was changing from coal to natural gas. And we probably don't know what our real our real emissions are because methane is leaked from wells. Don't have a good model for that. Why are you talking to us like a Catholic priest during Mass? Just because, I don't know, I feel like it. So yes, we have reduced carbon emissions. That's true. And we have improved a lot of air quality because burning natural gas burns a lot cleaner than coal does. You get a lot more CO2 and water out of a natural gas plant than you do out of a coal plant. There's a lot less stuff. There's a lot less bad shit that comes out of a natural gas plant. That's true. That's true. That is true. But at the end of the day, you're still burning fossil fuels. and you're emitting a lot of carbon. And as I said before, the methane. So yes, it will reduce. Like if you change from 50% coal to 50% natural gas, that's going to be a big drop. But you still have, you can't go any lower at that point. Once all the coal is natural gas, you're going to plateau. And we can't plateau. We have to actually go to zero or even negative emissions. And that's the situation we're in, is a lot of people are celebrating and trumpeting, look, we reduced our emissions so much, yay! And the actual result is, excuse me, sir, we're still burning a ton of fossil fuels. So I expect the liberal here to explain that because, you know, if he doesn't, this is just propaganda. But I think you should keep that in mind. Natural gas also produces CO2, just not nearly as much as combustion of coal or wood. It's very simple. If you want to understand something, if you want to understand CO2 emissions, this is how you do it. The worst thing for CO2 emissions is wood-fired things. So I'm talking about wood stoves, wood-fired heaters. Wood, burn wood, lots of CO2 per energy unit. Then it is coal. Coal real bad. Coal is a ton of carbon dioxide, ton of carbon per energy unit. Then it goes oil. Oil is a shit ton of CO2 per energy unit, less than wood, less than coal. And then you go from oil to natural gas. Natural gas is the least dirty of the fossil fuels, right? But they all emit a ton of CO2. Is there a reason we can't capture carbon emissions when we are burning the fuel? That is called carbon sequestration. We don't do that. We don't do that. It doesn't work because where do you put it? You have to spend a ton of money trying to store. It's like, imagine if you were, imagine you put a bonfire out in your backyard or out in the park and somebody was like, okay, it's one thing for them to say, I need you to sweep up the coals and sweep up the ashes when you're done and throw them away. We know how to do that. That's very comprehensible. If they were to go, I need you to catch all the smoke, would you even have a fucking idea how to do that? And obviously catching all the smoke is, and all the carbon emissions is a hell of a lot harder than cleaning up the burned remnants. Do we need to plant as many trees as all the animals and trees that have died in history make the coal and oil for that? It's impossible. Yeah. Also, yes. We only have so much land for the trees. I would take the CO2 I have at a garage that is empty. There's a lot of space in it. Yeah, exactly. They say that the cost of renewables are going down, so there's nothing to worry about. I assume that's obviously what the libs are going to say.
15 years, according to Jesse's models, which admittedly are trying to predict the future, we will probably get down to 3.5 billion tons, 50% lower than our peak. This week, I was able to talk to Michael Regan, the head of the EPA, and he also talked about this optimism.
Even when I talk to past EPA administrators, the role technology plays in the solutions that we're seeking, the quickness of innovation and the evolution of business models, matching with technology and science and data, we can move much faster than we've ever moved before.
So actually what's happening, and what actually happened is government policy in other countries, state-directed investment, state regulations, state mandates have created markets, created industries, many of these industries owned by the state, especially in China, and has created these products that now we can buy. And so instead of saying communism saved us, state-directed, a single-party state led by a communist party with intentional industrial policy saved humanity, they're going to say technology, as if that technology sprung from the fucking ether. That is ideological. That is ideological. That is bullshit. This feels like a trap. You need socialism to achieve it. If you wanted to save the planet, the absolute minimum you would need is Bernie Sanders style politicians in every country. No one to the right of Bernie Sanders can be allowed into political power within the next 15 years to have a shot. And more likely, you would need a stronger state than that. And you need to ruthlessly stamp on any resistance. Like you're fighting a world war.
We're aiming for net zero carbon emissions in America by 2050. And this is the first time in my life that I have felt like that might be possible. We have never undergone a shift in energy use that is...
I can tell you this, chat, just to have a little bit of optimism for a second. I have already thought to myself, like, you know, I don't own a home. You know, I might want to get a car in a year or two, a new car. Or, you know what I mean? A new car to me. And this is the first time I've thought, like, damn, maybe if I ever could afford a place, I would want to make it a green place. These subsidies will make it so I could have a green place. And I would want to invest my own money so I didn't have to worry about energy bills. I didn't have to worry about gasoline prices. So that I would be secure for the remainder of my adult life. I would want to build a place that was like truly would insulate me as much as possible from this out of control, unstable fucking society we live in. All right, let's get back to this.
Do this.
What's this?
It's an art project.
Okay, I like it. Picasso.
This bill basically has 3 big goals, and I don't see them being talked about. So here's the framework with which to understand this. 1, we are trying to decrease the amount of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases we emit in the atmosphere. 2, we are trying to make the impacts of climate change and pollution and also this energy shift less impactful on people, or ideally a good thing for people so that they like it. Particularly, we would like to decrease the impacts on the most disadvantaged people. And 3rd, and this is important to understand anything that's going on here, this is a bill that is trying to make the United States of America into an industrial center of the clean technology revolution. Now, there are...
Oh! Oh, is that right? See, I missed important shit. Fuck.
Some other small, or ideally a good thing for people so that they like it. Particularly, we would like to decrease the impacts on the most disadvantaged people. And 3rd, and this is important to understand anything that's going on here, this is a bill that is trying to make the United States of America into an industrial center of the clean technology revolution. Now, there are some other smaller things in the bill that don't fit into any of these categories. We'll talk about them in the future, but that's the 3 big things. Oh, look, each one of these blocks is $1 billion, and there are 369 of them, and we're gonna start filling them up. First, we want to drive down the cost of installing renewable energy projects. That's wind, solar, and grid-scale batteries. That's gonna lower people's electricity bills, and it's also gonna make it so that when you plug in your electric car in the year 2027, we'll get to that, the power turning your wheels is going to produce less carbon dioxide. And wow, we have filled up a lot of our billions. All this money is here to incentivize power producers to use...
I'd really like to be able, you know, for neoliberalism, there really isn't a great way to like invest on technologies that you think are a good idea as a normal human. Like, you have to be part of the elect to even be able to bet on technologies that you think are good. You were forced to just sit in the back and get grifted by the Mercers of the world and their super algorithms and buy stocks that get fucking flipped 5 times before when we hit the buy stock button. You know, we pay like an extra 20 cents per share from all the fucking flippers. And there's really nothing to do. Like, all you could do, like the intelligent thing to do if you invest in the stock market, is to just buy index funds. That's the actual intelligent thing. In before people say that they're the super genius who's going to select stocks better than other people. No, you're not. You really aren't. You're not. And even if you are, you got lucky. Real beginning of loot boxes in a digital format was Magic the Gathering online digital card packs. What? No. I'm talking about the actual packs. The paper packs. I tried to convince my mom of that, but she decided to experiment with a managed account. Oh, damn.
And neither am I.
Obviously, I'm not your financial advisor. Thank you, Ace, for reminding me to say that. Just, you know, and people being like, but Mike, you know, X, Y, and Z investment worked for me. Yes, that's called luck. If you don't recognize it as luck, you don't understand the market. Unless you're Nancy Pelosi or a politician and you know inside information, which you aren't. So this applies to you. By the way, it would be hilarious if the SEC investigated me for saying you should buy index funds only. His brother John Green, when making a case for voting for Biden, said that Biden took out time to talk to him after a speech. LMAO, sorry for spam. Really? God, these guys really are libs, aren't they?
more wind, solar, and grid-scale batteries. That's going to reduce the amount of CO2 being released into the atmosphere, but also it does the second thing. It does that by decreasing electricity bills, having minimum wage requirements and apprenticeship requirements. And it does the third thing by requiring that a lot of the stuff that is going into these projects, solar panels, batteries, wind turbines, are made in America, and the components are either from America or from our free trade allies. If you've ever played Tony Hawk Pro Skater, you know how like when you do like more than one trick in a row, you can get a multiplier. It's like that. If you do any of these individual things, you get some stuff, but there's multipliers every time you do more. But Hank, I hear you saying, we don't make a lot of solar panels or wind turbines or batteries in America right now. How are we going to be able to source those from America? Oh, don't worry about that. Boom. It's the second biggest thing in the bill, the manufacturing tax credit. Not only do the people buying the thing get the tax credit, but so do the people making the things. We're building out a whole industry.
Our free
here.
trade allies,
$37 billion
like China?
is expected to go toward helping companies make solar panels and batteries and battery components and wind turbines and et cetera, et cetera. And they've got to be made in the US. And
This is how you know it's neoliberal democratic shit. Tax credits, not state-owned enterprises like they do in China, but tax credits.
hit those wage and apprenticeship requirements. But Hank, you continue to be concerned.
Is it also means tested?
Solar power and wind power, they're intermittent. You can't expect them to be on all the time, and those batteries, they're going to handle some of that shifting, but not all of it. That is right. We need firm power, power that you can turn on whenever you need it. And the biggest piece of cash in this bill that goes toward that goes toward existing nuclear power plants, helping them stay open and keep operating. Existing carbon-free electricity with tax breaks, but only if you meet wage and apprenticeship requirements. Probably just expect that everything you hear about is going to have wage and apprenticeship requirements, because this bill has to be good for people, and also there need to be people to work on these things, so you need to be training people and you need to be paying them well. Now, also focused on firm power are smaller investments in potential future technologies like advanced nuclear power, advanced geothermal, and advanced biofuels. We don't know which of those things is going to be
On Radicat, I think Ford already qualified for the tax credit before, so I don't think they raised it because of the tax credit. I think they legitimately raised it because the demand is so high and they're just being greedy capitalists making money. They could only source so many batteries, right? So they're raising the price because they think they could get away with it. That simple. I mean, truck owners overpay for trucks. They always have and they always will.
Best or most impactful, but all of them could end up being important players in carbon-free firm power. All right, so now this hypothetical person who's basically constructing the bill with me is concerned that we're giving a lot of money to power plants, not a lot of money to people. Well, how about $22 billion for you, and another $14 billion after that, and then $12 billion after that? The $22 billion goes to help people upgrade their appliances in their homes, like water heaters, furnaces, stoves, and even just their...
Hell yeah, dude. Hell yeah, dude. Get yourself a new furnace. I've been wanting to switch industries from carpentry to working in solar installation for years now, but their pay is so much worse. And what I make, it's fucking stupid. Also, carpentry rules. Why would you want to get out of carpentry? You're inside as opposed to on the fucking roof getting blasted. Why the hell would you want to be on the roof getting blasted by the sun? Hell no. Hell no. Siding houses is carpentry. Oh yeah, true. True.
Electrical boxes to handle all of that new electricity, because guess what? You
Carpenters
might not
do roofs? No, roofers do roofs.
have noticed your house currently has
Yeah,
an
I know carpenters get blasted. I know. I was just making a joke.
exhaust pipe. It is extremely likely that you have power coming into your house in two ways. The electricity that powers the lights and the microwave and your Microsoft Zune, and then there's the gas power that powers your furnace and your water heater and maybe your stovetop, possibly even your clothes dryer. All of that means that your house chugs out CO2, and there isn't an easy way to clean that up without replacing those methane-burning appliances with appliances that run on electricity. And if you can't do that, not only are you just releasing a lot of carbon dioxide, also you're reliant on a single source of fuel for your heat and your hot water, and that fuel price can fluctuate a lot, while electricity costs don't fluctuate as much. And those fluctuations hit low-income people extra hard because fuel costs and energy costs are a higher portion of what they spend their money on. So this $22 billion goes toward helping people buy, and in some cases outright covering the entire cost of, appliances that electrify these previously gas-powered things. Heat pumps to heat and cool homes using electricity, heat pump water heaters, electric or induction stoves stovetops. Just buying one of these appliances saves people money in the long term already, but folks usually can't afford the upfront costs of that, especially doing all of these things at the same time. Well, no longer. The next $14 billion are to help people and property owners make their buildings more efficient, and these last $12 billion are for, you guessed it, electric vehicle tax credits that you probably can't use. I know what you're thinking. All that sounded so great until that last part. Why can I not use my electric vehicle tax credit? Because of the third thing. These cars also have manufacturing requirements. And when this bill goes into
Honestly, I would like to see, I don't understand why they don't just make the tax credits fully refundable, but
effect, the number of cars that will qualify for that is quite small, and they will all be sold very quickly. Now, there were already tax credits on electric vehicles, but those credits only apply for the first 200,000 vehicles from each manufacturer, and many manufacturers, GM, Tesla, etc., have already burned through all of those. This extends those indefinitely for the next 10 years, but only if they meet the requirements. Because again, the bill is about all three things. Other countries have had this kind of industrial policy for decades, and that has allowed them to build up their industries producing these things. And the people who crafted this bill, for better or worse, want the US to have that kind of industrial policy. It now looks like we are more than halfway through the things that this bill does. But we
industrial policy is
down
good,
here,
Chet.
things start to get much more dense, and then you realize that there are actually hundreds of ways that this bill spends money, and each one of them does a different thing for different people in different places. Like, Hank, what about the carbon impact of forest fires? Yeah, that is in there. How about decarbonizing airplane fuels? Yeah, early stages in trying to get that done, that's in there. Converting garbage trucks and city buses to electric, it definitely does that. Tax incentives for existing power plants to capture their emissions, yeah, $3 billion for that. Electrifying most of the Postal Service fleet, another $3 billion for that. Reconnecting communities that were divided by the interstate highway system, yes, $3 billion for that too. Helping farmers figure out systems for sequestering carbon in their fields, sure. Cleaning up and electrifying port infrastructure, definitely that. Early market creation for low carbon building materials, also in there. New transmission lines, because all of this electrification is going to require a more robust grid, yeah, that too. Charging stations for EVs, got that as well. Grants for tribes to invest in clean energy, got that too. Buying debt from rural power co-ops if they promise to shut down their carbon-emitting power plants and giving them money to build new infrastructure, that's in there too. There's a lot of things that are trying to do really specific individual things, but there's also big hunks in here that aren't
the first kind of left-wing thing they've said.
Prescriptive. It's money for communities to do things that they want to do to decrease their impact. Here's EPA Administrator Michael Regan again talking about that.
A lot of these grant dollars that are in the Act, we're able to give those to community groups who are partnering with universities and incubation centers. The matching dollars and the low interest loans.
Incubation center. I want an incubation center in every community. It's funny because I am very familiar with the idea of an incubation center. It's like a neoliberal which is basically this. It's a public-private partnership with a university where you will get, where entrepreneurs will get assistance in starting a business or funding it. It is the incubation center. It's not that it's bad per se, I guess, but I find it comical. It's not like it's a bullshit thing. It's bullshit. It doesn't make gigantic impact. It really doesn't. How come the bill doesn't have any description of new fines or penalties for polluters, but just grants and tax rebates? Because this is Democrats we're talking about.
Are available to people who have never been at the table. If we get these universities and these young adults, these incubation centers, really tackling these issues with community groups on the ground, these solutions can look 1,001 different ways. And we have to feed all of these solutions to see which ones work for each individual community. We don't have to accept the notion that there's a one-size-fits-all. It can look 1,001 different ways.
But Hank, this hypothetical person who is walking me through this entire bill, is now asking me, why are we doing all of these individual things instead of just doing the one thing? If you did one thing, it would do everything. And that's just to make fossil fuels more expensive.
Gretchen, stop trying to make fetch happen. It's not going to happen.
A few years ago, an ex-lobbyist from ExxonMobil was caught on video saying this.
Nobody is going to propose a tax on all Americans. And the cynical side of me says, yeah, we kind of know that, but it gives us a talking point that we can say, well, what is ExxonMobil for? Well, we're for a carbon tax.
Here's the thing. We passed this bill staring down
ExxonMobil, we're for a carbon tax because we know it'll never happen.
Found the highest inflation rate in decades and $5 per gallon gas. There are two ways.
I can tell you right now that if you're this is another thing. Neoliberals, they choose policies designed for maximum pain for regular people. The idea that the way to solve carbon dioxide is to just put a massive tax on everything that you like in your life and then hope the market fixes it through the invisible hand has got to be one of the dumbest ass motherfucking things I've ever heard. I have nothing to do with the truck infrastructure, and neither do any of you. The highway system that we're in, the transportation system that you have, is designed at levels above you, and you have very little constructive input. The idea that the solution is then to punish me and hope things work out is absolutely idiotic, but par for the course for a neoliberal. What's a socialist idea? I know. You pick a technology that's carbon neutral and you build it. And you say, hey, instead of driving your car, why don't you take this free public transit system that we've built that's carbon free? And then, hey, and if you want to drive your car into the city, well, you're going to have to pay a fee. But here's a place that is different, where you actually build a functioning alternative. You're like, all right, we have a housing crisis. Let's build a whole shit of high quality public housing that everybody who's not in the top 10% of income can live in, charging rates of rent that are based on what it costs to maintain and invest in the housing, as opposed to a profit incentive for a leech landlord. And then we connect that with a walkable, electrified public transit, and we just fucking start doing it. We don't stick our thumbs up our asses and go, well, we taxed the oil, I guess it'll fix itself. Carbon-free public transit. Exactly. All that is carbon intensive to make it happen, but not doing it is more carbon intensive. We need to use the carbon energy to bootstrap ourselves into a situation where we're sustainable. So obviously we're going to have to use carbon technologies to bootstrap us into carbon-free technologies. Duh. You had to use charcoal so that we could bootstrap our metallurgy up until the point where we could use coal-fired shit. We had to bootstrap. Just make it high quality, durable, maintainable, something that could last for hundreds of years so that we don't have to keep spending carbon making houses. That's another good point. Engineer it better. The carbon from making new things is mostly one time. Stop that propaganda. I mean, listen, there's always going to be some amount of carbon intensity that's required, but when you literally take carbon out of the ground to burn it for energy, that's going to take a hell of a lot more carbon than, mining something and killing some trees. Socialism has never existed without a slave class. I think what you mean is capitalism. I think you mean capitalism. That's like one of those situations where you're like, you describe capitalism and then you call it socialism at the end. You're actually, what's funny is you are describing dialectical materialism. That's exactly what Marx said. Did you know you're a Marxist? Did you know that that's the entire point of dialectical materialism, that there's a have and a have not? And that's the all of history can be heretofore described? Wow, incredible. I love when pro-capitalists are like, here's the core insight of Marxism. Don't you hate socialism now? And it's like, actually, no. Accidentally based.
Ways to incentivize the move toward clean energy.
See, that's one of the things that's really exciting to be a leftist, and what makes me have energy every day to come in and stream, is most people have never heard the left-wing argument. They've legitimately never heard the left-wing argument. They've only ever heard a straw man caricature of it through propaganda. And when they actually hear it for the first time, and they see the evidence for it, it's a revelation. So you can never really piss me off. The only thing that can piss me off is the knowing ignorance of the wealthy that are trying to destroy us all. But Mike, trains and widely available public transit are old ideas. We need some newfangled high-tech bullshit like electric cars so that Elon Musk can become a trillionaire. Yeah, exactly. Motherfucker said capitalism beats fascism. They're the one and the same. What capitalists were expropriated when Nazi Germany came into power? The Junkers and all the other capitalists were totally fine. Fucking dummy. Question for you. When we make the coal and other folks involved in fucking up my landscape in Appalachia removed my mountaintops, fix it like they said, oh no, you're fucked. That's just going to be scarred forever. Let's keep going.
We can make clean energy cheaper, and we can make fossil fuels more expensive. And with people already having a hard time getting their butts to work, nobody in Congress was going to keep their jobs if they intentionally made fuel costs go up. This bill is very nearly all carrots for clean energy, and just a few sticks for fossil fuels. But I will talk about those sticks now, because one of them I love very much. Methane is the most simple carbon-containing molecule, and it is even better at trapping heat than carbon dioxide. Over the short term, it's 80 times better at trapping heat. And as we've moved away from coal and toward natural gas, which is basically just methane, that has been good because methane is a more efficient fuel. You get more heat per carbon.
He's explaining what I said an hour ago.
Dioxide molecule that you release. Except that at every step of the way, methane can leak into the atmosphere. At the wellhead, at the pipeline, at the compressor, at the infrastructure that delivers it to your house, and the facilities that use it. The Methane Emissions Reduction Program provides incentives to fix leaks and acquire more advanced systems for keeping methane from being released. And it also pays for teams to check and see if there are methane leaks and charge increasingly hefty fines to the companies that are releasing this entirely usable, potent greenhouse gas into the atmosphere. Those fines go up and up and up until they generate a fairly significant amount of revenue as it forces these companies to clean up their act. The other sticks against fossil fuels are fairly minor. They reinstate the Superfund tax, which is basically a big pool of money that polluters pay into, and that money is then used to rehabilitate the damage that they do to the environment. It is a super fund. When I was a kid, I thought it was the Superfund program. It's not that. There's also an increase in the percentage of money that the government gets back from oil companies when they take oil and gas off of federal lands. And finally, there's an increase in the cost of holding a lease without developing it. So just having it sit there and not using it, there's an increase in that cost. Both of those are basically ways to disincentivize companies from using federal lands to produce oil and gas. So there are a couple of things to keep fossil fuels a little more under control, but mostly we want their cost to remain steady or even go down as demand for them decreases because the alternatives are just better. But also, weirdly, there's a couple of carrots for fossil fuels.
And I would do anything for love.
Since we are obsessed with anything and everything that makes us feel bad, if you've heard anything about this bill, you have heard that Joe Manchin, moderate Democrat, forced the inclusion of a few very weird provisions. First, and most frustratingly, he took a few oil and gas leases in Alaska and the Gulf of Mexico that Trump had authorized and then Biden had paused and people have been fighting against for years and was like, you want my name on this? You make those leases happen. It's super weird. It's super frustrating. It's outside of the normal process. No one likes this. Except for, of course, the oil and gas companies and Joe Manchin. And the other thing was basically a way to prevent any president or lawmakers in the next 10 years from banning fossil fuel leases on federal land. And it does this by tying the ability to put clean energy projects on federal land to a requirement to offer leases for oil and gas drilling on other separate federal land.
Now, when they say prevent a president from doing that, you could always pass another law. There's a principle of law that you should understand. No Congress can bind a future Congress except through constitutional amendment. So you can pass whatever laws you want now, but a future Congress could come along and just change the law. But seeing how difficult it is to change laws, what ends up getting put in now is likely to stick around long past when people all agree that it's stupid. Please clown this dipshit on fascism as an ideology about everyone being the same. Capitalism lets you be what you want. No. Capitalism is just the private ownership of the means of production.
Any primers?
That's it. That's it. As long as people can own factories for profit and own apartment buildings for profit, you're in capitalism. And capitalism only provides freedom for the capitalist class, the people that have capital, that have the means. If you're a worker, you are subject to the complete autocracy that is having a job. You're only free when you're not at work. This is basic for everybody who's ever had a job and is not in their parents' basement typing on Twitch. I wanted to send you these. Libs send to end all lib shit. 2 punishments for chat if someone gets spicy. Wait, what? Oh, no. All right, let's keep going.
Offered lease is not a sold lease, and a sold lease is not an oil well, but it is still disappointing, kind of gets stuck in your throat, even if modelers show that the overall carbon effectiveness of the bill only goes down by about
Are you seeing the Bed Bath & Beyond squeeze? There's a short squeeze in Bed Bath & Beyond. All right, hold on. Let me finish this. We'll talk about that. It's almost over.
2% because of these provisions. But Manchin, I guess, got what he wanted out of it, which is everyone talking more about how he loves fossil fuels and they're his pretty little baby than the entire rest of the bill. And also, he got to be like one of the title names on the bill, despite being one of its biggest opponents. So now the right question to ask is all of this going to work? And luckily, I have prepared for you more squares. Each one of these is roughly 5 million fewer tons of CO2, and by 2030, there are 200 of them. So that's roughly 1 billion fewer tons of carbon dioxide per year. Here's where we'll be. Decreased CO2 in transportation saves us 280 million tons per year. Cleaner power generation saves us 360 million tons. Cleaner industry saves us 130 million. Cleaner buildings save us around 70 million tons. Same for the equivalent carbon dioxide effects of mostly methane, but also other greenhouse gases produced by cars like nitric oxides. And finally, carbon sequestration in agricultural and forest lands gets us a final 80 million tons. And of course, we do not pause there. The effects of these changes are projected to get us down another 500 million tons by 2035. I'm aware that there are going to be people who are going to be mad at me for being pretty unapologetically excited about this bill. Like, I'm mad that we lost the Civilian Climate Corps, which would have been thousands of young people working on the ground on these problems. I am frustrated that we lost a lot of due process on these oil leases, and they weren't even something that I was actively working on, so I can't imagine what it must be like for the people who've been fighting those battles. Look, I don't know if it's that I'm old now, or that I'm privileged in like 1,000 ways, or that I've been through a number of climate fights that went very badly. Or maybe I'm just thinking practically about the fact that this might be our last chance to get something substantial done for years, like many years maybe, especially because there was every likelihood that this could have just not happened, like many other parts of the original Build Back Better didn't happen. In fact, 4 measly weeks ago, it seemed like it wouldn't happen. I got to talk to Jesse Jenkins about that.
I was on vacation with my family, or leaving for vacation, and I got the call from Senator Schumer's staff that the bill was dead. Same phases of grief, right? Shock, loss, anger. And some people stopped at anger and they just got mad at Joe Manchin on the internet and yelled at, got cynical like you were talking about. And some of us, including some members of, a handful of members of the Senate, again said, no, this is not how it's going to end. I refuse to accept that. So this is also bargaining, right? That's one of the phases of grief. And we went back to work and we bargained, and it, against all odds, it worked. I had pretty well given up hope that it was going to succeed at that point, given that this is the second time the rug was pulled out from under us. I wanted to be able to tell my kids that we fought to the very end, and it worked. And I am so grateful. I'm going to tear up a little for all the people really that did that, because it was very, very close to failure.
I don't harbor any illusions that I live in a perfect world or a perfect country or that perfect legislation exists. There are 330.
By the way, that was the dumbest ass fucking quote I've ever seen. What a total dipshit. Fuck that guy. You work for senators. Yes, you have the inside track to negotiate with Senator Dipshit. Congratulations, idiot. And what they didn't mention is that Chris Coons went to Joe Manchin and said, everyone hates you. They blame you for ruining everything. And Manchin was like, well, what if it was like a movie and I came back out of nowhere and we did something? Wouldn't I be the hero? The bullying on the internet worked. It allowed your dumbass dipshittery negotiations to actually happen. You had no clue why things are happening either, you fucking idiot. So yes, the getting mad online helped. You did your part. My God, what a dipshit. And also, not doing the Civilian Climate Corps is actually embarrassing. That is so something. That is so fucking small. And it costs so little. And it would have been such a good, it would have given Joe Biden the opportunity to stand around young people who liked him because they had a job. But no, he can't even pull that off. What an idiot. Yo, Mike, true story. I got in an argument with Biden's sister over Manchin at a book signing. Long story. Like 2 days before Manchin's turned. Okay, that sounds really funny. I believe you. I believe you because that's the funniest story. The internet is not real life. It's not even an accurate reflection of real life. It's merely a projection of the collective fantasy. Okay, that's wrong in every aspect. The internet is a physical manifestation of infrastructure that exists in the real world. It's not intended to be a simulation copying the rest of the universe. It's a communication network. Part of that is projections of fantasies, but it's also used for various things, including pressuring people. And the decentralized social media, for as garbage as they are, does give the ability of normal everyday people access to people they wouldn't have accessed before and yell at them and bully them. Everybody who says the internet is not real life spends at least 8 hours of their day on the internet. I've never met anybody who's not on the internet all the time who says the internet is not real life. Only people on the internet all the fucking time say that. The people that are on the internet are too busy like refinishing their project boat or fixing up their like project car or writing a novel or some shit or learning how to paint. They're not sitting around saying how the internet doesn't matter. Jesus Christ. The people that kayaked out to Manchin's houseboat did more than that staffer? Absolutely true.
30 million of us. The fact that we get anything done at all is a little impressive. And over the last 10 years, we have made tremendous strides in cutting carbon emissions, and that has been in large part because of government investment in the US and elsewhere. Between 2009 and 2017, America spent around $20 billion per year fighting climate change. Over the next 10 years, we will spend $80 billion per year. There are a lot of super powerful people who have been working really hard this whole time to slow this down as much as they can. At first, they say it doesn't exist. Then they say it's not caused by people. Then they say it's caused by people, but it's not that big of a deal. Then they say it's that big of a deal, but the costs to take it on are too great. We have hit them with reality at every step in that process, and we're going to hit them with reality at this step of the process too. They will tell us that the costs are too great, and after we prove to them that it's not, they will tell us that it's too late. Nothing gets done if you don't believe it can't be done. And I, for the first time in decades of this, have started to believe that it can be done. And it's happening, I think, for two reasons. One, because of the very hard work of a lot of people, from policy to science to communication and outreach. And two, because it is getting hard to ignore the very real effects of all of this extra energy in our atmosphere and in our oceans. We might be in a very narrow window here, a moment when the effects are too present for anyone to ignore anymore, but not so present that they will hold us back from implementing solutions. I don't know how long that window is going to be open, and I was not sure that it was open until somebody did something and said something, and they kept working, and they kept pushing, and they kept making the case that this needed to be done until it got done. But now it feels like the window's open. It does not feel like we are done. One big step does not get you over the mountain.
Is this basically the ACA of this generation? I mean, I think the ACA is a perfect analogy for this bill. This is Biden's ACA, without a doubt, which is it does some really good things, but it sucks ass because it's half and quarter measures. And if we just did the good things, we would be way better off. But how do you approach, let's say you're starving and you come across a quarter of a loaf of bread. Are you pissed that it's not the whole loaf? Yeah. Do you munch it down greedily? Do you have energy to keep searching for more food? Yeah. That's what we're at. That's where we're at. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. You know, there's a phrase that we say, which is my mantra. My mantra is pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will. Does that mean just pessimism all the time in your brain? No, because the will only acts when directed by the intellect. You know, those are things. That's obviously part of how the body works, right? But what it means is, what I mean when I say that is, look at the reality unobstructed by rose-tinted glasses, but at the same time have the irrational mentality of an optimist. We look at the structures of our society and they have a facade of stability and strength and hardness, but they are as soft as tissue paper. All of this can be uprooted. Most of what you see was been built in the last 50 years, max, maybe 100, 150 if you're lucky. You can literally reshape the reality around you. That's the power of being a human being. And a leftist is an optimist. If you don't believe in a better future, you can't truly be a leftist. You will become a post-leftist. You will become a nihilist. I feel like this isn't finding a quarter of a loaf of bread. This is the dickhead who has been keeping the bread from you, giving you a quarter loaf and being told to be grateful and support them. I mean, I don't give a shit. I agree with you, Cashew Paladin. I think that's a good analogy. But when they gave you the quarter loaf, You eat it. You didn't promise shit. I didn't have to promise shit to get this bill passed. Did you? I could scarf that quarter loaf and then go right back to yelling at him. Give me the rest.
There is much more to do, but as I've been saying, I am more optimistic now that this is a challenge that we can actually take on than I have been maybe in my entire career. John, I'll see you on Tuesday. Heads up, my full interviews with Jesse Jenkins and Administrator Regan are up over on Hank's channel. I learned a ton from both of them. They are fascinating conversations. There's links in the description. And also just a general thank you to everyone, and there are thousands of you who worked in some way on this bill, either advocating or writing or doing policy analysis. Like, it's a big thing, both on my behalf, but also on behalf of like my son, who's going to be around for more of this future. And I want his future to be one that I can believe in, one where the fair rides that he loves so much are powered by clean energy. And you're helping with that. So thanks.
Even with the biggest ever climate bill, U.S. lags China's green spending. Here are solar panels operate over a sewage treatment plant in Zhengzhou, China. The historic is this going to be a robot? No, it is. Okay. The historic U.S. climate deal that has now passed both chambers of Congress is being touted as one of the most ambitious decarbonization commitments made by any government to date. Is it? Well, many countries have passed climate regulations and invested in green infrastructure, but the scale of the Inflation Reduction Act has few parallels. The bill devotes $374 billion to climate and energy measures over the next decade, with a focus on subsidies that make it easier and cheaper to live more sustainably. But when you combine public and private investments aimed at accelerating the energy transition, China is by far and away the biggest spender, according to the data compiled by the energy research group Bloomberg NEF. Neither the IRA nor Europe's Green Deal appears likely to change that. China spent $297.5 billion last year on energy transition. They're doing an IRA every year. Incredible. While ours lasts over 10 years. Incredible. While the EU member states devoted $155.7 billion and the US $119.7 billion using the BNEF methodology. When comparing international efforts, it can be tricky to untangle where government expenditures end and private ventures begin, and analysts frequently lean toward more qualitative analysis. One major distinction between the U.S. plan and models pursued by other major emitters like the European Union and China is that the American plan doesn't rely on carbon pricing. Compared to a policy mix of regulations, targets, and investments as used by the EU and China, the U.S. is taking a different approach to climate by opting for a massive spending bill. Carbon pricing has long been championed by economists as a first step toward decarbonization. It has been embraced by dozens of nations, although debates about its effectiveness rage. A growing group of political scientists argue that a better approach is to make clean energy and greener technologies more accessible, much like the approach now being taken by the U.S. The EU's Green Deal, approved in 2020, aims to retool how the continent's economy works by redesigning everything from farming to how cities are built. The bloc plans to spend 30% of its $2 trillion budget for 2027, or about $600 billion, to fight climate change. And that doesn't include individual member state investments and subsidies. The IRA includes funding for a new federal green bank. The $27 billion is dwarfed by Germany's state-owned development bank KfW, which has assets of about $500 billion and is a critical source of capital for green projects worldwide. While the Inflation Reduction Act will mobilize unprecedented amounts of investment into clean energy in the United States for the next decade, China and the EU are spending as much or more. In China, much of the money is being directed at a world-leading expansion of wind and solar, which was supercharged when President Xi Jinping said in 2020 that the nation is aiming to be carbon neutral by 2060. The build-out of renewable generation in China has been so successful that it now threatens farmland, and authorities are seeking to balance new solar installations with food security. China is set to install a record 156 gigawatts of wind turbines and solar panels this year, according to China's Renewable Energy Engineering Institute, a think tank that supports the country's National Energy Administration. By comparison, under the Inflation Reduction Act, additions to the U.S. wind capacity could increase from 15 to 39 gigawatts per year and from 10 to 49 gigawatts of utility-scale solar, with solar growth rates accelerating. So basically, China is going to install in 1 year twice as much as we are for the next 4 years. China, China, China! According to preliminary analysis by researchers at Princeton University. But perhaps the better question to ask about state-backed climate efforts is whether they will sufficiently reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The International Energy Agency has charted a pathway for the world's energy systems to become net zero by 2050, limiting the worst impacts of climate change. By that metric, most major emitters are spending significantly less than they need to be. To bring worldwide energy-related carbon dioxide emissions to net zero by 2050, annual capital investment needs to reach almost $5 trillion by 2030 and $4.5 trillion by 2050. The one thing public climate spending in the US, China, and the EU all have in common is that the investments aren't enough. Are you watching the stream unsubbed? You're making income inequality worse. You are doing anti-praxis. We are the only Twitch stream that will not accept scam advertisers, and I will never fuck you over by selling you crap